Hey there, Weeb Army. I am the Goblin King, and it's time for another winter season anime review. What I have on the docket for you this week is a straight fantasy anime. Not another isekai or I'm trapped in a game world, or anything like that. Just a simple fantasy world with magic and swords and inexplicably modern suits. Ties, blazers, and everything. It still mystifies me as to why the Japanese do that with clothes. I mean, I suppose I get the underwear a bit, but why the suits? I have no answers to this. Anyway, the anime I'm reviewing this week is called The Strongest Sage with Weakest Crest. It's another one based on a light novel that I never read. It's also fairly standard with a lot of the usual tropes that seem to go along with this genre of anime. Yet, I'll get into that in a few. For now, I'll go into the breakdown and characters like usual. Set in a world in which the abilities and status of a magic user are predetermined through crests which manifest when they're born, an incredibly powerful mage called Gaius decides he wants to have another crest, and uses his magic to reincarnate himself in the future to obtain the crest he's always desired, one marking him as a close combatant. He's reborn a few thousand years later as Matthias Hildesheimer, with the crest that he's always wanted. After obtaining the memories of his previous life as Gaius, he's crestfallen. See what I did there? To discover that humanity's knowledge of magic has regressed, and the mark he went through so much trouble to obtain is now considered the lowest of the four crests. The story follows him as he enters the Second Magic Academy, and abruptly begins turning the preconceptions of the magical elite on its head and introduces techniques long thought to be legend in this era. Over time, he discovers that malevolent forces may be behind humanity's current magical state and makes it his mission to root them out. Matthias is the reincarnated form of the ancient sorcerer Gaius. He's, just like in my last review, a typical anime hero. He's strong, dependable, putting others before himself, and seems to be a decent guy. Though, unlike the last main character I spoke about, this guy seems to have a little bit more depth to him. He actually shows a softer, more uncertain side when it comes to interactions with one of the female leads of the show. He tends to stumble over his own words and act shy around her. It was actually shown right off the bat that he has feelings for this girl, and it could be construed through a small segment at their meeting that he fell for her at first sight. Now, I could be wrong about this, but that's not something you often see in anime. At least I've never really seen it that I can recall. Not like that. I like it when a show or movie actually does something uncommon like that. It sets them apart from the more standard fare and gives them that much more watchability. Does it save this show? Nah, but I'll get into that in a few. The other thing that Matthias displays periodically is another trait that you don't often see from main characters in anime. You'll often see it in villainous characters or side characters, but not as often from a main. Especially not outside of a shonen anime or manga. That being an actual eagerness to face a strong opponent in battle. Now, plenty of characters have the willingness to do it, especially in defense of themselves or others, but not that many display that eagerness. Which was a big clue to the inner core of Matthias' character, and his reasons for wanting to go so far as to kill himself and reincarnate to get the crest for close combat. Lurie is the young woman that I previously mentioned upon whom Matthias has his crush, or first love, or whatever the writers were trying to get across. Feelings which are very much reciprocated by Lurie, and which result in much the same behavior from her. The shyness and awkwardness, I mean. Overall, she's a sweet and good-natured girl who quickly takes to Matthias and trusts him implicitly. She also carries the crest that Matthias had in his previous incarnation and learns to wield it very quickly in the ways that Gaius did, most often using it to support him and the rest of the party. Alma is Lurie's best friend and is the first one to encounter the reborn Matthias within the show. Like her friend, she quickly takes to the young man, though she displays no outward signs of affection for him aside from the friendship. She has a slightly mischievous personality, noting the evident feelings that Matthias and Lurie have for each other, and rarely misses a chance to poke fun at them about it. Magically, though she's not quite as powerful as either Lurie or Matthias, her archery skills are top-notch, and she often serves as the ranged combatant within their party. Iris was actually the best character in this anime, at least in my own humble opinion. Iris is a dragon that's several thousand years old, and knew Matthias back in his other incarnation. Due to the circumstances of their encounters back then, Iris is willing to join Matthias' party and help the group out. Due to her massive strength and power, she often serves as the party's tank. Her human form is a lolly, I suppose, though personally I'd call her more of a chibi. mostly just because she's the one most often displaying the more cartoonish anime antics. She was also the funniest and most entertaining character of the party. Though I'll admit that there was a little bit of a disconnect between her character displayed within the show and the idea that she was a several thousand-year-old dragon. Which I suppose is a really good jumping off point and a nice segue for getting into the issues that I had with the show itself. I mean, let's start with the obvious one, which again is the exact same issue I had with the last anime that I reviewed, that of the ultra-powerful main character. I get that this is a massive trope of the medium itself, and especially in the genres of fantasy and isekai, but Jesus fucking Christ. I mean, at the very least, they've given some passingly decent explanations in the last couple of anime that I reviewed for why these characters are as powerful as they are. In the last one, he leveled the character up before being transported to the game world. This one, he was powerful in a past life and purposefully reincarnated. Fine. That being said, though, it doesn't really excuse the overall shoddy storytelling that results from this phenomenon. If you're going to tell these stories about amazingly powerful characters, you need to have some villain or some sort of story elements, which can't be easily overcome by applying that enormous power. When the main character can legitimately beat all comers with basically a wave of his hand, it gets fucking boring. There's no sense of danger or conflict. We already know that he's going to easily overcome the obstacle he's facing, and so all we're really doing is watching this character on a pleasant stroll through the world. There were a couple of episodes that were mildly entertaining due to either the intrigue surrounding the events, or an enemy that fought in a relatively novel way that could not just be overcome using brute strength. The latter also had the added addition of people aside from the main character himself being in danger. That one certainly upped the tension level and was all the better for it. The last episode also had slightly more tension due to that addition as well. Overall, though, it was mostly the main character being able to hand-wave away every bit of conflict, and it made the show rather boring to get through. Even the two girls were more powerful than they should have been due to his tutelage. Though the overall story was decent in and of itself, with them having to find and root out the dark forces at the center of humanity's decline, it becomes just a trape through the pretty world with pretty colors, because we know the main character's never going to be in any real danger. One of the biggest sins, to me, and something which sort of embodied this idea that the character was just way too powerful, was the fact that every single legendary or near-legendary artifact that the party came across or sought out was made by Matthias' previous incarnation. I mean, come on, motherfucker. Were you the only person making artifacts back in the day? Were you the absolute most powerful magic user of all time or something? Was there absolutely nobody else in your time that was even remotely on par with you? It just made the whole thing unbelievable to ridiculous levels and took it to that space of self-insert power trip fantasy that I personally can't stand. It's juvenile. For real, those are the types of stories that I was coming up with when I was a nerdy bullied tween. It was the same exact issue I had with Overlord. Though with Overlord, that character honestly just felt sociopathic to me. All of which is honestly just kind of sad because the foundation for this anime, this story, was really solid. If the writer had done even something as small as limiting the main character's power somewhat, this could have been a good anime. Not necessarily great, but good. With a nice solid story and pretty good artwork. Just doing something like not giving him access to all of his past power, or having to actually overcome the prejudices surrounding his crest or something, rather than just basically stepping over every obstacle. If it weren't for the comedy and at least one of the characters, this anime would have been a major slog to get through. If I had to rate this thing, I'd give it probably a 5 out of 10, and that's being generous. The character designs and overall art were decent, but not nearly enough to overcome the botched storytelling. Neither were the characters, even with some added interesting bits, and Iris. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for you on this one, folks. Let me know what you thought in that handy section down below. While you're down there, that's about where this anime is. Maybe you could make a better one. If you like what I have to say and you want to join my big green horde, you can do so by crushing those like and subscribe buttons, like a goblin. If you watched this long into the video, I appreciate you, sincerely. I'll see you all tomorrow for another pop culture failure and Friday Night Tights. See you then. Lates.